All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. You may have a seat. I believe at this point, the state's ready to call their next witness.
Yes, Your Honor. Jeff Bledsoe.
Jeff Bledsoe.
Yes, Your Honor.
Step right up and raise your right hand and be placed under oath.
Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you give in this case to be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Good afternoon. Would you state your name for the court?
Jeffrey Dean Bledsoe,
And would you spell your last name, please, sir?
Bledsoe.
All right. And what do you do for a living?
I am the executive director for the Tennessee Sheriff's Association.
Okay. And back in 2018, how were you employed?
I was sheriff, the elected sheriff of Dixon County.
All right. So I'm still going to refer to you as Sheriff Bledsoe, if that's all right, because that's what I've called you since I've known you. I think.
Yes, sir.
So Sheriff Bledsoe, how did you become, or did you become involved in the search for Joe Clyde on April the 4th of 2018?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. And who'd you get a call from, I suppose?
I believe it was my chief, Deputy Jerron Holt, gave me a call that morning of the call that we had responded to.
Okay. And then did you go out to the scene after that?
Yes, sir, I did.
Okay. Describe the scene as it was when you got there.
When I arrived, we had personnel on scene, and there were searches that were already initiated with K-9 and communication with the family, and things were just starting to evolve and get, I guess, spin up at that point.
Okay. And what did you do when you got there?
My position was to oversee what we were doing and the personnel that we had on scene, and to start formulating what plans we would need to have an exhaustive search at that time.
Okay. And at that point, was the Dixon County Sheriff's Department and the TBI kind of working side by side on this? Or was it mostly the Sheriff's Department at the time you arrived?
At that moment, it was just our office, and then later we started bringing in extra resources and making those connections for an alert and things that we would normally do.
All right. And that's something I want to get into is kind of other agencies and the overall scope of the search, if that's all right. About what time did you arrive on scene?
There were so many days that I arrived on scene, I'm not positive, but I would say somewhere between 8 and 9 a.m. It would have been after things that were initiated by the patrol division that did the initial response.
Okay. And then through the day, did other agencies begin to kind of filter in as requested to help with the search?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, I've got a PowerPoint prepared, and before we get into it, you and I have gone over this PowerPoint pre-trial. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And there's a bunch of agencies listed on here, and you've gone over those, and those were people that were on scene to help with the search. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir. To the best of my knowledge.
Sure.
I'm not
There was
sure
a lot
it's
of people
inclusive.
out there. Is that fair?
Yes, sir.
I believe at last count there were something like 24 agencies from different parts of the state and the United States that showed up. Is that an accurate representation?
Yes, sir.
All right, so the main two agencies involved in this case was TBI and the Dixon County Sheriff's Department.
Yes, that's correct.
All right, and go to the next slide, please. Obviously, we had several other state agencies that showed up to help. What did the Red Cross do as part of the search?
They're tremendous with the support that they provide for just basic needs on scene, for taking care of the personnel on scene with food or looking for a way to shelter in place, and I believe they provided even a mobile restroom facility initially.
All right. And what about the Tennessee Highway Patrol? What was their function on scene?
It was a numerous, voluminous task that they would have. Initially, I think we had support from their aviation unit with their helicopter, and troopers were arriving on scene to either assist throughout the process with the searches or control of the traffic that was in the area, or on the major highway. We had issues with traffic getting backed up down to that area or people crossing the highway. So they were huge support with their mobile command coming and just their team effort with the search.
Because I imagine with all the volunteers we had, there was a lot of cars around, things of that nature.
Yes, sir. We didn't have enough place for them, but we found areas to get.
All right. And go to the next slide, if you will. And this is just the other sheriff's departments that showed up to help. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, it is.
Cheatham County, Humphreys County, and then Bexar County, Texas. What did they do?
They specialize in use of drones and equipment that they can use as they fly over areas that can help us to pinpoint certain vegetation that is rich in nitrogen and allows us to go back and look at those areas as a point of interest.
And so all that was utilized as part of this search and the ongoing searches?
Yes, sir, later after that initial.
Sure. All right, next slide, please. And then this is just the local police departments. Of course, the Dixon Police Department, Kingston Springs, and Fairview Police Department. They all provide manpower to come and help search.
Yes, sir, they did.
All right. And then the next slide, please, sir. Of course, we had multiple agencies, smaller agencies, state, local, that showed up. Tell us about some of the emergency management agencies. What were they providing?
They're crucial in establishing our own scene command and documenting with something this large of scale and the duration. We would need to document the actions and radio traffic and what information they receive could be channeled to the scene, and then that's kind of our point of communications. And they also do much more than that with logistics of taking care of our people with food and drink and any of our needs that we need, and that is just a big support to an operation when we're on scene.
Sure. A lot of people out there to help try to support and organize.
Yes, sir, and they have a mobile vehicle that has computer-aided dispatch terminals within that vehicle to help us to log everything and to track as much as we can.
Sure. All right. And the next slide, please. All right. And Sheriff, so is this kind of an overview of the area of Garners Creek Road? Can you see that?
Yes, sir, I can. It starts, looks like, from about 3rd Street going south.
Would this be 3rd Street up here?
Yes, sir, right there.
Going across that way?
Yes, sir.
Then we've got Garners Creek Road coming down this way. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Does that appear to be the residence?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right. And then is this old Garners Creek Road coming down that way?
Yes, sir, to the west side of the Garners Creek.
Next slide, please, Mr. Evans. And then, as you stated, there were a couple helicopters, I think, that were flying. Did we go over some footage from one of those helicopters that kind of shows the command center and the search that was ongoing?
Yes, sir, we did.
All right, Mr. Etheridge, if you will play that, please. And Sheriff, that right there, is that kind of the command center where everybody was set up, kind of gathering, information was coming to, that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. The homeowner allowed us to use his driveway and pretty well turned over his shop to us for us to have shelter and places for people to rest. But that's kind of the nexus or the center of the incident command.
Sheriff, is that you and that group of people there huddled up, kind of talking?
Yes, sir. I just put my coat over my arm with the uniform on.
All right. Sheriff, from this view here, the 1112 Garner's Creek, the defendant's home and Joe Clyde's home is kind of up above where the screen is. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir, would be at the top beyond the screen.
Okay. The school buses, what were they being used for, Sheriff?
We had such a large-scale presence for search, we used those for transportation to deploy teams to certain areas on the map to do a thorough search.
Whose helicopter is that there, if you know, Sheriff?
It's one of our agencies that partnered with us, that's Tennessee Highway Patrol.
And they were actually flying a search pattern of some sort, is that accurate?
Yes, sir, they were assisting from the aerial aviation side.
Now, I believe Sergeant Baker, who was one of the first to arrive on scene, went up in the helicopter first. Is that accurate to your knowledge?
That's my understanding, yes, sir.
Your Honor, it has to move that video in as the next exhibit.
It will be 46, if I'm correct.
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, I'm going to show you a photo. Does that appear to be the photo that we showed on the screen earlier, just an overview of the area of Garner's Creek there?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right, and the same photo that's up on the screen now?
Yes, sir, it is.
All right, that's to make that the next exhibit, Your Honor.
47.
I'm going to hand you a series of photographs. Could you identify those photographs?
Yes, sir, they appear to be satellite imaging of the area of the scene that we were at, and has different overlays on the map.
And was your department involved in the creation or helping to create what's known as a SAR map?
Yes, sir, we were involved with that.
All right. And what kind of information went into that map?
Each team that we deployed, we would place a tracker on them, and that tracker would communicate with the software. I don't know all the complex details of the technology, but it would map where that tracker would go, and we could take sections of the map and make sure we covered everything within the radius and scope of our search.
Okay. And I'm going to put an image up here on the screen. Is that the first image that you have there in your hand?
Yes, sir, it is.
And could you describe kind of what that image is?
It looks like towards the top, that will be Highway 70, and off to the right of Middle would be where Garner's Creek comes down. It's kind of in yellow on the screen where the road's highlighted, but off of 70.
Highway 70 up here,
Yes, sir.
and Garner's Creek is coming down right through here.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
All right. And what are these shaded areas? What do they all represent?
Honestly, sir, I'm not sure what the colors represent on that. It may have been areas that we still needed, but I can't say for sure.
Is that how kind of the area was broken up to be searched in different grids?
Yes, sir. We could take what was naturally there in the terrain or property lines, fence lines, tree lines, and that would help us to stay on target of what areas we needed to be in, because it's totally different on the ground than what you see from the aerial.
Like this would be from the ground, is it?
Yes, sir. Correct.
You're gonna have to make that the next exhibit. Next.
48.
Yes, sir.
Now, this is kind of a crazy picture. Is this a more blown up view of the area that we were looking at?
Yes, sir. It's zoomed in, more detail.
And the SAR map, would it include details of what was searched and that kind of thing?
Yes, sir. It should have the tracking from those GPS trackers to show each movement. It just lays a line on the map.
You're gonna have to make that the next exhibit.
49.
Sheriff, what are we looking at here?
It's of the same area with Highway 70 near the top, and it's the Tennessee City area. And it, again, it's got the grids on it. I couldn't tell you what exactly each color and point is specifically to this map.
Okay. Is this Highway 70 up here?
Yes, sir.
So would this area with all the colors and words be the area of Garner's Creek and the residents?
Yes, sir. Those were primary areas that we needed to initially focus on.
And what is this yellow line down here?
That's Interstate 40, which is in the southern end of our county.
And what about all of these red lines? What do those represent?
I'm not positive what exactly those lines are at this point.
Okay. And then, so area from up here was all searched around the residence?
Yes, sir.
And then, did the search extend down south towards the interstate here?
Yes, sir, it did.
Okay. You're gonna estimate that for next exhibit.
51. 50.
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, is this a zoomed-in view of the south portion of what we were just looking at?
Yes, sir, it is.
And this shaded area here and these red lines, that indicate search areas that were searches conducted?
Yes, sir, this should be from the GPS tracking.
Next exhibit, please.
51.
And then this photo, Sheriff, what is this yellow box here? Is that an area that was searched for more thoroughly along with these red lines from the GPS?
I know it was an area that was searched thoroughly. I do not recall the date or anything like that, but yes, sir, it was an area of interest for us, and I think that's why it's highlighted.
And this road here that we see down south, what is that?
That's, again, Interstate 40.
In relation to the residents, where is Interstate 40?
Interstate 40 is south of the residence.
About how far? Do you have any knowledge of that?
I would say 6 to 8 miles. I'm not positive on the mileage.
It's multiple miles.
Yes, sir.
Fair statement. Estimate that the next exhibit.
Yes, sir.
Sheriff, this over here, does that represent the Harris Road area? Or what represent? Is that where the Harris Road area is with all these search marks around it?
I'm trying to get my bearing on this map here.
It can be difficult.
So I believe that line going across maybe is the TVA right-of-way where it's got the cleared path across, but this is so small I can't quite distinguish which area that is, but that would be consistent with that area.
The Harris Road area, was that an area of interest?
Yes, sir, it was.
And was that area searched, kind of combed through multiple times?
Yes, sir, thoroughly.
All right. And when an area is searched, you said the team carries that tracker with it. Is that what the red lines are? The team that marks on the map where the team goes?
Yes, sir, and the way it's so many paths there, it colors it in where it's hard to recognize what's under it, so yes, sir.
I understand. And Judge has to make that the next exhibit, please. Next slide, please, Mr. Etheridge. So we've spoken about there were many volunteers that showed up to the search. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it is.
When did they begin showing up?
Day one, we started with some initial searches, and then that continued on for quite some time.
Okay. Did volunteers, how were they organized, or did they have to register first?
Yes, sir. We wanted to vet those that were searching, and we had some parameters of how many people we could have per team so that we could manage everything and not let everything just be all over the place. So everything was strictly under guidelines and protocols that would be consistent with search teams and incident command, how many people would be with a leader of a team.
All right, so we were able to essentially track how many people we had out there on the ground. Is that fair?
Yes, sir. We wanted to make sure everyone was documented and the areas were documented.
All right. And how, you said the search team, teams went out or the people went out in teams. How are those teams formed and who led them, if anyone?
From the first day, I asked for our special response team to come in, and those were coordinated with people outside of my administrative level, but those teams, when they got on, were put into certain areas and certain groups with them. I would have to look at the documentation because we were doing so many different things at that point that I was depending on others to structure the team and make sure I would oversee and look in and see where they were going and could see the map in pretty much real time or once it laid it back over on the map. But I couldn't tell you exactly
Absolutely.
how that was organized.
Did every team have an officer with them?
Yes, that's my understanding, yes, sir.
Okay. So a team of volunteers would go out and there would be an officer placed with them and a GPS tracker to record where they went?
Yes, sir, because we needed that local communication too with our dispatch on scene and incident command to have the local radio traffic and that's consistent, yes, sir.
So the first search, we just kind of got it grouped there, was from April the 4th to April the 6th. Is that accurate?
Yes,
The
sir.
initial search, I guess we could call it.
Yes, sir.
Were more searches conducted after that with citizen volunteers?
Yes, sir.
All right, and is that the dates that we have listed up there?
Yes, sir. May 19th was our largest search where we could expand that out and have the proper resources, and there was an operations plan put together, and members were vetted who would be team leaders that had certain backgrounds within search and terrain, and so it was all organized on the 19th. That was the largest one that we had.
And the May 19th search, I mean, that was well after charges were filed in this case. Is that correct?
Yes, sir.
So did the investigation, did it ever really stop? The search, did it ever stop?
No, sir. If today there's anything of interest, there would still be searching. There's no doubt in my mind with that, and if anyone says that we stopped searching, that would be misleading.
Sure. All right, next slide, please. And then this is a list of, well, let me ask it this way. Were there multiple searches conducted by the Sheriff's Department and other police agencies that didn't include citizen volunteers?
Yes, sir, specifically for the law enforcement realm.
And I'm going to hand you a document. I know that's probably hard to see from where you're seeing. What does that document list out that I've handed to you?
The left column lists the dates, and the right column gives locations and the agency in brackets that participated in these numerous searches.
And what's the date range from the top to the bottom?
From April the 8th until May the 19th of this year, 2021.
So May the 19th of 2021, it's just a couple weeks ago.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
The Honor has to make that The next exhibit, please.
54? Yes, sir.
All right, next slide, please. So we talked a little bit about resources that were used. TBI and THP air. Were there ponds that were searched?
Yes, this area is just vastly populated with bodies of water and ponds. It's more than any other area, I think, in our county. But it was a logistics undertaking just to cover the waters that were in that area.
And how was that done?
We had help from a number of sources with dive teams, or that could put boats in. They could use conventional technology to drag the scene. There were some that were able to help that had the underwater cameras, or TWRA has a device that's similar to a underwater drone or a robot that has camera systems, and they can put that in, and the operator can run certain grids, patterns, depending upon the size of the body of water, and it just depends on the depth and the volume, the size.
And then, of course, we had multiple police agencies on the scene, including the special, the SWAT team and the cameras. Were there, to your knowledge, did you see dogs being used, search and rescue kind of dogs being used?
Yes, constantly.
All right. Next slide, please. Were you involved, and to your knowledge, were there some experts that were brought in to try to help with this?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Dr. Berryman and Dr. Jantz, are those the doctors that would kind of review any bones that were found, to your knowledge?
Yes, sir.
All right. And Dr. Arpad Voss, what did he do? What is he helping them with the search, or what was his role?
He has a specialty in which it's a scientific measure that I wouldn't be knowledgeable of to try to explain. But I did vet him. I was given references of agencies that he had assisted across the country, and I called and spoke with probably 3 or 4 different agencies in which he was able to assist, and I was able to verify that his technology has proven itself. And through the help of TBI, we were able to fly him in and have him assist with the search.
And I believe he worked on the Casey Anthony case in Florida, did he not?
Yes, sir, that's my understanding.
All right. And then Dr. Michael Gibson, I believe he brought in a ground-penetrating radar. Do you have any knowledge of that being done?
Yes, sir. I remember the name and the use of the technology.
All right. Next slide, please, sir. All right. Sheriff Bledsoe, have you ever been involved in a missing child search that was this large in Dixon County?
Not at this scale, no, sir.
Have you ever known of one in Middle Tennessee, to your knowledge?
There's another one that comes to mind in another county, which there was a child missing, but I don't know the scale of their operation compared to ours. I'm sure it was everything, every resource they could find.
All right. And Your Honor has to make that PowerPoint.
This would be 55.
Yes, sir.
Just a moment, please, Your Honor. That's our questions, Judge.
Cross-examine.
Hi, Sheriff. Been a while.
Yes, sir, Mr. Lockhart.
The searches that took place were even thorough in regard to, I believe, a psychic had called in and thought maybe the child was in a well. That was followed up on too. Is that correct? Do you recall that?
We had numerous tips from people that represented as psychics, and everything that I was aware of was followed up on.
All right. And very extensive and meticulous search and investigation. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, sir.
And was any physical evidence found indicating that Joe Clyde Daniels was murdered?
Not that I was involved with, no, sir.
All right. And was there any physical evidence found that indicated that Joe Clyde Daniels was even dead?
No, sir, not that I'm aware of.
And did your department or other agencies go to the house where a lady called in and said her child's shoes or boots were taken off her front porch that same early morning or night this Joe Clyde went missing?
Yes, sir. From the best of my knowledge, I remember something with the lady calling about boots and maybe the barn, and that was checked.
Did they take dogs out there to try to pick up a scent?
I don't know on that. No, sir. I'm not sure.
Do you feel like that's something that should have been done?
If we had the dogs on scene when we checked, yes, sir.
All right. And did you have a meticulous GPS search done of the area where the lady called in and said her daughter saw a little boy in dirty pajamas?
I don't recall that, sir. That may have been after I left the sheriff's office. I'm not positive. Do you know a date on that?
It would have been within 5 days or less.
Oh, 5 days from our initial response?
Yeah, from
For some reason, I remember pajamas, but I don't remember anything that would have been reported to us. I know through our process of documentation and review of all that information that was coming in that it was followed up on. If that one wasn't, then it's escaped my radar.
If that was not followed up on, that would be a pretty serious mistake, wouldn't it?
It would need to be reviewed, yes, sir. We need to talk to that person.
And would you also want to do a GPS search in that location?
I would want to get all the facts of what was described and seen, and then make a determination if we needed to use resources to search that area.
But I mean, if a mother told you her child said she saw a little boy in dirty pajamas within a few days of Joe Clyde missing, that would want to be followed up on, wouldn't you?
Yes, sir, if it fits the description and everything. Even beyond that, we may want to talk to some neighbors or something just to see what that would be about, see if we could validate it.
But if they say it's a little boy in dirty pajamas, even if they can't give a great description.
Hearsay at this point. He's getting into what someone else said, offering that for the truth of the matter asserted.
Ladies and gentlemen, step out, please. All right, your objection is as to hearsay, but this is really a question that's asking, and Mr. Lockett has done this on another occasion, asking a witness about an incident that we've had a pretrial hearing on, in which I ruled we would not allow the testimony of the mother to come in and testify that the daughter made this statement. I'm assuming that Mr. Lockett may have her as a witness and may bring the child in and let her testify because he's asking these questions. I don't know that, but it does seem to me that right now what he's asking this witness is about a hearsay statement of the child that I've already ruled would not be admissible because of the factors that I cited in my ruling. I'm not sure how it would be applicable to this. He's being asked a theoretical question about an event or a piece of evidence that I've ruled, at least at this point, is not admissible under the form of the mother testifying of the child's statement. If the child were to come in and testify, that'd be a different matter. She's the one who actually had the first-hand knowledge. So that's my concern, is that the question that's formulated right now is the mothers reported that the child said she saw a child in dirty pajamas, and that's the very thing that I have ruled on as being inadmissible in that form. So my concern is allowing the question to this witness that seems to suppose that that information is coming in, because I think in a way it may or may not be coming in depending on whether the child is going to testify. But your objection is as to the basis of hearsay, is that correct?
It's hearsay and I didn't want to get into the out-of-court hearing in front of the jury, but relying on the court's prior ruling that this is hearsay and can't come in absent the girl testifying. And what's happening now is Mr. Lockhart's trying to get in double hearsay, the child's statement to the mother and then the mother's statement to Mr. Lockhart. So certainly, I think it's certainly the court ruled that he can ask if there was a lead that was followed up on, which has been done and answered. But getting into what the child supposedly said, we would object to as hearsay.
Judge, we also ask for an instruction to the jury to disregard Mr. Locker's entire line of questioning because he is in clear violation of the court's pretrial ruling. That's why we had his lengthy motion on this issue with multiple witnesses. We have a transcript from that hearing. He is in direct violation of this court's order. And the jury needs to be instructed to disregard that entire line of questioning.
Mr. Lockhart, you wish to respond?
Yes, Your Honor. Your Honor had ruled that statement could not come in as to what the girl saw for the truth of the matter asserted. This is not being asked for the truth of the matter asserted. The state has gone to great lengths with multiple pictures and GPS maps, and 20-something agencies come in to show how meticulous and thorough their search and their investigation was. I'm simply trying to establish that there were these two reports that came in, not the truth of the matter asserted, but based on the report, the same late night or early morning hours this child went missing, a woman's child's shoes were taken off the porch. Dogs weren't brought in to try to follow that or trace it. No evidence of a GPS search to try to find who put those shoes on and left with them. And then the incident where the lady said her child saw a little boy in dirty pajamas. The court already knows from a previous hearing that there was no meticulous GPS search. The testimony was that officer drove up and down the road and stopped at bridges and looking over. So this comes in to show, again, bias of the investigation, and also to contradict the sheriff's testimony that this was this broad, expansive GPS search with multiple agencies. It goes to show that it was not that thorough. It was not that meticulous, and that they had leads. They even followed up on psychic leads where psychics would call in. Yet you have a mother that calls in that her child's shoes were taken off the porch this same time period. That's not followed up on. So it's not for the truth of the matter asserted, and I think the court should charge a jury. That's not introduced for the purpose of the truth of the matter asserted, but it's introduced to show evidence of bias in the investigation. And that's clearly under the law. And Your Honor ruled I could ask about the reports and the effect it had on the officers and what they did, is my recollection.
I believe the same argument you're making now is the same exact argument you made at our motion hearing, and that was that it ought to be coming in to show bias of the investigation. And I made the ruling that I made because it was essentially double hearsay. The child was only 4 years of age, and the mother, when she testified, said, I asked if the child was available to testify. She said she doesn't remember any of this happening. And so the unreliability in that particular situation was what caused me to lead me to exclude the evidence. I think the point of the fact is that you've asked the question and stated in your question the fact that, if there was a report that was made such as that, the evidence of that report being made will not be introduced under my ruling. You've asked the question about whether they followed up on such a lead, and my ruling, I'm going to sustain the objection as to any further questioning about that and instruct the jury that questions are not evidence. And the fact that you've asked a question was purpose of trying to show what the defense's position is about the extent of the investigation and whether other leads were given that weren't followed up on. But that's the sole purpose for which that question was asked.
And also, Your Honor, since the jury's out, will the same type ruling being in place, because we've already heard hearsay from a 3-year-old, is the court going to require that 3-year-old come in to testify?
You were in the courtroom when I made my ruling, correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
And you heard the basis of my ruling was that it was an excited utterance, and it did not require that under that case, the State versus Franklin case, the 2010 Supreme Court decision, did not require that the person be absent or be brought into court in order to admit an excited utterance. And that was the basis of my ruling. I do not find that there was no argument at the hearing that we had that this statement by this 4-year-old child regarding her supposedly having seen a dirty boy in pajamas, or boy in dirty pajamas, there was no argument made by the defense propagating that was an excited utterance. It was simply a statement made by the child allegedly to the mother, and the child doesn't remember the statement being made. So I am applying the same standard because of the fact that two things don't apply. Your client, or rather your position is that I ought to require this child at 3 years of age to come in, and excited utterance exception, which I rule upon, does not require that. So my position is that I have ruled correctly on that, and that's what I'm going to do when the jury returns.
So at this point, I just want to make sure I'm clear. I'm not to ask any more questions about this, and I think that's what the court's saying.
What I'm saying is that you've asked this officer if they got that report, did they do an aerial search? And he's answered he's not even aware of that report being made. You've asked him, wouldn't that be important if that report came in to make that search? And he, I believe, said it would be important. And I think, how much further do you feel that you need to go to establish your issue about the search?
I'm just wanting clarification. I don't need, what I asked was about a GPS search. And I don't intend to ask about an aerial search. I just want to clarify where we're at. So I'm not to ask any more questions about these reports because it's been covered.
The report of the, there's been no objection to the report about the boots being missing, and that's been brought out in other testimony. There was no hearing about the boots being missing from a neighboring house. There's no hearing on that where I've had to make a ruling. The only ruling I've had to make is on the report about the child seeing the little boy and allegedly seeing the boy in dirty pajamas. And that's what I've ruled upon, and that's what I'm saying. It would be inappropriate to continue asking questions about that particular issue regarding when I've made that ruling. So
yes, Your Honor.
I've allowed it. I'm not going to tell the jury to disregard it, but I'm going to give them a limiting instruction that would allow them to consider it only for the purpose of demonstrating anything else, and remind them that the question that you ask is not evidence.
Yes, Your Honor.
All right.
All right.
Mr. Crouch.
Judge, my only follow-up to that is, first of all, the question from Mr. Lockhart, not only in violation of your order, but he didn't give the sheriff any indication of where this report came from. Your Honor is aware from the hearing, this was a report made in Humphreys County, which Sheriff Bledsoe would not be aware of. And we had two witnesses that testified from Humphreys County Sheriff's Department eliminating this possibility. First of all, well, I'm not going to go rehash that entire argument, but I think the jury needs to hear that the report Mr. Lockhart is referring to is from Humphreys County. So Mr. Lockhart never even directed the sheriff as to what county the report came into. He immediately went into the violation of your order. And I'm asking that be reflected to the jury.
I'll be glad to ask him if he knows the location, how far away it was. I don't know that he knows that.
Well, I'm going to bring the jury back in, and I'm going to instruct them, as I've said, that the questions of lawyers are not evidence. And I've given them in my initial instructions, and they will hear again, and that the question that Mr. Lockhart asked about certain other reports being made have not been introduced as evidence, and therefore they're not to consider them as evidence that those things actually occurred. They were asked by Mr. Lockhart of this witness to try to show whether or not there had been as broad an investigation as he contended in his testimony, or as the state seemed to present, but that they are not to consider what Mr. Lockhart asked in his question as being substantive evidence that those things actually occurred. And I'm going to leave it at that. Mr. Lockhart, I don't intend to apply any sort of sanction by telling the jury to disregard your entire line of questioning. I understand your theory behind but I do think that it's the same argument that was made at the hearing. So let's be sure before, if you're going to intend to try to do that again, let's try to make sure the jury's out and you propose that question before we go any further.
Yes, Your Honor.
Bring the jury back. Thank you. You may be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, as I told you before, my job is sometimes as the rule keeper or the gatekeeper or the enforcer of the rules. In your absence, I considered an objection the state had to the line of questioning that Mr. Lockhart was asking about other reports. I would remind you of what I've told you in our initial instructions, and that is questions that whether it's the state or the defense, a lawyer's questions to a witness of reports being made and how that affected or what steps were taken in it. There has been no evidence presented to you of either of those instances taking place. So those questions are not reflective of substantive evidence that has come before you. They are just questions that are designed to say that if such a report had been made, should it have been followed up? And the officer has testified what his knowledge was about either one of those reports. But I'm instructing you to disregard any inference that might have come from the asking of that question that such reports were actually made in this situation. They were made, the question was asked by Mr. Lockhart to help you, and I told him this is how I'm going to address it, to help you understand in his position was the search was not as widespread as what the state's position it was. Does everyone understand that? All right, so if you'll follow my instructions in considering that evidence, then we'll go forward. Mr. Locke, do you have any other questions?
No further questions.
Mr. Turnbow, do you have any follow-up?
Just briefly, Judge.
So Sheriff Bledsoe, Mr. Lockhart made mention of the fact that there was no physical evidence found. What day was the missing child reported? You recall the date?
The initial response?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. That was April the 4th, 2018.
All right. And from April the 4th until later on, over 2 days later in the afternoon of April the 6th, was there a criminal investigation going at that point, or was it just for a missing child?
Later that day, it turned criminal.
Later that day on the 6th?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So there were 2 days there, over 48 hours, where it was just law enforcement, citizen volunteers, 24 agencies looking for a missing child.
Yes, sir.
Was the defendant in custody at that point?
No, sir.
Was he free to roam about where he wanted to go?
Yes, sir.
He was not under surveillance, wasn't being followed, was he?
No, sir. Not that I know of.
Okay. So essentially, there was a 2-day head start.
Yes, sir.
That's all, Your Honor.
No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Bledsoe. You may be excused. They call your next witness.
Agent Pat Mooney, Your Honor.
Raise your right hand and face your court.
Thank you. Do you solemnly swear affirm the testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
When you have a seat, if you'll step in, speak into that microphone as loudly as you can.
Yes, sir.
Could you state your name for the court, please, sir?
Patrick Looney,
And how do you spell your last name, Mr.?
Looney.
All right. And what do you do for a living?
I'm a assistant special agent in charge over the TBI's aviation unit.
All right. So as part of your duties in the aviation unit, what do you do?
A wide variety of search and rescue operations, covert surveillance work, everything in support of multiple agencies.
All right. So do you actually fly an airplane for TBI?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you're a pilot.
Yes.
And what kind of, you said you fly search and rescue missions. Is that using TBI's plane?
Yes.
All right. Tell us a little bit about how you would get involved in a search. Where would the request come from? What would happen?
They come from a wide variety of areas. Sometimes it'll be a DA's request. Sometimes it'll be inside with our field agents in cooperation with the local agencies. If they have a need for an air asset, that they would filter that through us either by phone or email or just however means they need to get in touch with us.
All right, and we have a PowerPoint we'll get into here in a minute, but what are some of the plane's capabilities to help in a search and rescue type mission?
The TBI has Pilatus PC-12. It's an intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance aircraft, as well as a passenger and agent and law enforcement transport aircraft.
Okay. And let's get into the PowerPoint here if we can. And Special Agent Looney, you and I have gone through this PowerPoint before.
Yes, sir.
And does it accurately reflect the plane's camera and pictures and video that were taken that day when you started flying?
Yes, sir, it does.
All right. And just kind of a couple more introductory questions, I guess. Did you get a call to go on April the 4th of 2018 to Garner's Creek and help in the search of a missing child?
Yes, sir, I did.
All right. And did you respond to that request in the airplane?
Yes, sir, we did.
Do you recall about what time you got up in the air over Garner's Creek?
Just sometime in the beginning of the morning.
All right. And this photo here, what does this appear to be, Special Agent Looney?
This is a still image from what the camera system inside our aircraft will produce. Looks like it's in infrared or thermal imaging.
And this red dot, that's a dot or a circle that we place. Is that where the residence was at 1112 Garner's Creek?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Next slide, please. All right. What are we seeing here on this still image here? We have a video we'll play, but is that thermal imaging from the plane?
Yes, sir, it is.
Tell us a little bit about what does thermal imaging mean? What does it actually do?
Well, it's what the camera does in that specific camera that we have in the payload bay. It measures temperature differential.
Okay.
So it only sees in black and white, and the camera, there's an algorithm. It gets kind of down in the weeds, but it takes temperature differential from a specific area that the camera is looking at. Algorithm puts a picture together, and there's two modes you can do. You can either do white hot or black hot, and just depends on which one has the most clarity for the image we need.
All right, let's play this video. Special Agent Looney, what is this right here?
Looks like wildlife, probably a deer.
And why are those showing up white?
The particular mode that we have is white hot. So if you'll notice that the head of the animal is hotter than the body, and a lot of times it's just like a human would kind of show the same way. The darker colors would be a cooler surface.
Okay. All right, let's go on to the next slide.
on the right side of the image, you can tell that looks like cows in a feedlot.
Talking about right around here?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And they're also showing up white due to the mode of the camera?
The body heat, correct.
Body heat.
Yes, sir.
And I believe you said earlier that's how a human would show up on the camera.
That is correct.
All right. Let's go to the next slide. All right, so let's talk about there's a lot going on here.
It's busy.
So tell us about, and there's a video clip we'll play which may help, but tell us about what's kind of going on here.
Yes, sir. This is a color daytime image. There's multiple information inputs that's compiled into this image. So if you look in the left side where it looks like a picture from a camera, and then you'll see the blue lines.
This right here?
Yes. That is the color camera image. And the blue lines that you're seeing kind of drawn across that is we have the capability to, before the airplane takes off, we can program in search grids. So if the airplane is above an address making a circle in an orbit, the camera has the technology to where it can methodically search in a left to right pattern or north, south, east, west, whichever way we program it.
So while you're flying circles around the area, the camera's staying on these blue lines and checking the grid.
That is correct.
Accurate? Okay.
And it's a lot of information that comes in, and the camera operator, a lot of times what this allows us to do is to take this image back and review it in closer detail while we're on the ground instead of being in flight.
Sure. All right, let's go ahead and play the video.
The other images you see kind of in the middle of those, that is just a mapping software that we use to represent house numbers, street names, map and parcel data.
So now here we're kind of zoomed out on this side. And does this show kind of a zoomed out view of where the plane grid is, where it's flying?
The search grid, yes, sir. That is correct.
And all this is playing special agent. Let me ask you a question. So while you're flying the plane, do you have someone else operating the camera and kind of working through all this stuff?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
So it's kind of a two-man operation when you get called out on the scene.
Yes, sir. Top of the screen shows altitude above ground, latitude, longitude, and then slant range distance from whichever target we're looking at to the belly of the aircraft.
Okay. And so this on the right, this is just a zoomed out view of what the camera's seeing here on the left, zoomed in.
That is correct.
Let's go to the next one. And so what are we seeing here, Special Agent Mooney?
Yes, sir. Whenever we have a search like this, if it goes beyond our duty times, this allows us to be able to take our search grids and forward those to crews that come on after we go off duty. That way there's a continuity of search area and everyone knows where we've searched and where we haven't and where we need to add to.
So that's what's shown here is the grids that they're searched and
Yes, sir.
researched.
One sortie would be the green area and then a follow-on sortie would be the blue area.
Okay, and this, what is this here?
Looks like spaghetti noodles, but this is a representation of the flight path of the aircraft over a search area. That's a Google Earth image, and the white lines are the exact path that the aircraft took over the ground.
And so that yellow dot there, is that the residence in question?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and then all the white lines is where the aircraft was flying while the camera was doing the search grid?
Yes, sir, that is correct.
All right. Your Honor has to make the PowerPoint the next exhibit, please.
56.
Yes, sir.
That's our questions for Special Agent Looney, Your Honor.
Any questions from the defense?
No questions, Your Honor.
Thank you. I'll show you may step down.
Yes, sir.
I'm sorry. You may have a seat. You may be excused if you like.
Yes, sir.
Yes. State calls Detective McCartney.
Raise your right hand.
Do you solemnly swear or affirm testimony you give in this case be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Would you state your full name for the court, please?
Sarah McCartney,
Thank you. And would you spell your first and last name?
SarahMcCartney.
Thank you. And Detective McCartney, where are you employed?
With the Dixon County Sheriff's Office,
And what's your position there?
a detective.
And how long have you been a detective?
I've been a detective for almost 5 years,
Thank you. And how many years of total service do you have in law enforcement?
a little over 10 years.
Thank you. And Detective McCartney, were you working on the morning of April the 4th of 2018?
I was?
And were you dispatched to the Garners Creek area?
Yes, sir.
And why were you dispatched there?
My supervisor had called me that morning a little bit before 9 and told me what was going on and said that I needed to respond to the house.
Okay. And do you know approximately what time you arrived on scene at 1112 Garners Creek?
I arrived on scene at 9:08 a.m. that morning.
Okay. And what did you do when you arrived?
When I arrived, I immediately went inside the house. I knew my supervisor was in there. He had told me that he was going to be speaking with the parents. So I went inside to see what he needed me to help him do, and he was there speaking with Crystal Daniels.
And when you say he, who are you referring to?
Sergeant Trevor Daniel, that's my immediate supervisor.
And you went inside the residence?
Yes, sir.
And who all other than Sergeant Daniel did you see inside the residence?
I saw Crystal, the siblings of Joe Clyde, Alex, and Noah, and an Aunt Joyce.
Okay. Anybody else at home at that point in time?
No, sir.
All right. Do you know where the defendant was?
I did not know.
But he was not in the residence?
He was not.
What else did you do while you were at the residence or on that property?
While my sergeant spoke with Crystal, I noticed Alex standing there, so I took an opportunity to speak with him for just a moment and kind of get his take on things. And he told me that he didn't really know what had happened, but he did show me where he and Joe Clyde had been sleeping the night before. And he just pointed out to me what sides of the beds they were sleeping on. He pointed out to me that someone had used the toilet and not flushed it. And he thought that it was Joe Clyde, but he didn't give me a reason why he thought that. He also told me that Joe Clyde had had an accident during the night and had urinated in the floor.
Okay. What'd you do after that?
After that, another one of our detectives had arrived on scene, Detective Troy Martin. He began photographing the scene, and I was just kind of with him observing and just to see if we could see anything that needed to be photographed or anything that needed to be pointed out.
Did you walk around the residence with Detective Martin as he was taking photographs?
I did.
All right. And I have a stack of photographs that I would like for you to look through and identify before we go any further.
Yes, sir. These are the pictures that Detective Troy Martin took at the residence.
Okay. And if I could have Mr. Etheridge go to the first photo. And Detective, starting with the first photo in the stack, is what you're seeing what is on the screen?
Yes, sir.
And can you identify that photograph?
This is the mailbox of 1112 Garners Creek Road, the residence of the Daniels.
Thank you. And Detective, can you identify any of the vehicles that we see?
There's a THP unit there in the driveway facing the road. The black truck, I'm not sure whose that is.
Okay. Now, when you say the THP vehicle, is that parked at 1115 Garners Creek?
Yes, it is.
So that's not in the Daniels residence driveway, it's across the street?
Right there. The Daniels mailbox is across the street from their own driveway.
And is that a for sale sign that we see at the location of 1115?
Yes, sir, it is.
And do you know the name of the residents or the owners of 1115 on April 4th, 2018?
That would have been Jeff and Cheryl Smithson.
And Detective, if you will go to the next photograph, and I'll move that as the next exhibit.
Number
Detective.
57,
47?
50.
57. Detective, the photograph that you have in your hand, does it match what we see on the screen?
It does.
And can you identify what we're looking at?
It's the mailbox, just a closer picture. You see the same THP vehicle there. The maroon vehicle you see parked on
58. And the next photo?
This is going to be a picture of the outside of the Daniels residence, the front of the house, and their driveway.
Move that as exhibit 59. This photograph?
This is the mailbox, the other side of the mailbox.
And on this, we see 1112 Daniel, and what's the other name on the address?
Austin.
And are we looking north or south in this photograph?
In this photograph, you're looking north towards Highway 70.
Move that as the next exhibit.
Sixty.
Detective McCartney, is the photograph in your hand the same as on the screen?
It is.
And what do we see?
The outside of their home.
Detective, as you were going around the outside of their home, did you see any markings in the yard that may have been caused by a vehicle?
It looked like there were tire tracks going through the front yard.
Move that as exhibit 61.
Yes, sir.
Detective, what's this next photograph?
It's another picture of the outside of the home, more towards the side, and you can see one of their storage sheds in the back.
And are you in this photograph?
I am. I'm standing right beside that silver SUV.
The silver SUV that you're standing next to, is that who does that belong to?
Detective Troy Martin.
And the other vehicles that we see are a silver Impala and a tractor trailer?
Yes.
Okay. Move that as exhibit 61? 62. So, Detective, are you and Detective Martin essentially photographing the exterior of the residence right now?
Yes, the entire perimeter.
And what is this photograph?
This is going to be the north side of the house.
Move that as exhibit 63. And what's this photograph?
This is a silver Impala that also belonged to the Daniels family.
Move that as exhibit 64. Detective, can you identify this photograph?
These are their two storage sheds that were located behind the home.
Move that as exhibit 65. All right, Detective, can you identify this photograph?
This is the back of the residence.
And Detective, what does this appear to be on this back deck?
On that table,
Yes.
a Power Wheels car.
Okay. And what about next to the railing on the deck?
It looks like boots.
Boots? What other item is behind the boots?
I can't tell.
Okay. Move that as the next exhibit, please.
66.
And Detective, what do you see in this photograph?
The truck, the green truck that belongs to the Daniels family, the storage sheds, the backside of those.
Move that as the next exhibit.
67.
It appears you're going around the house counterclockwise, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
And what do we see in this photograph?
This is still the back of the residence, but more towards the south side.
And do we see a better idea of the tracks you were describing earlier?
Yes, you can see tracks. Looks like they're going around the trailer.
And I'm going to point, what do you see here?
Car tracks.
Car tracks going around the house?
Yes, sir.
Right. Do those tracks continue all the way around?
They do. Out to the driveway.
And in this photograph, what do we see here?
That is going to be the defendant's vehicle again.
I think that is Exhibit 68. Next photograph, continuing around the house, is that correct?
Yes, sir. We're back to the front, towards the south side of the house.
What do we see here?
The tire tracks.
I believe that's Exhibit 69. Detective, what do we see in this photograph?
This is the front of the house, and again, you can see the tire tracks continuing around the house.
That is Exhibit 70. Okay, Detective, it appears that you have approached the rear entrance to the house, is that correct?
Yes.
And can you describe what we see in this photograph?
This is the back porch, and that's the back door. They use that as their main door.
Okay. And what, do you see any items placed in either of these chairs?
No, sir.
I believe that is the next exhibit.
71.
And Detective, can you identify this photograph?
That is the steps that are leading up to the porch that we just had a picture of.
I believe that is Exhibit 72. All right, Detective, it appears that the rear door of the residence is open, is that correct?
Yes.
And what do you see as you enter the rear door?
There are toys in the entryway.
I believe that is Exhibit 73. Detective, is this, I don't know if you can see from there, but what do we see on this?
That is a latch that was at the top of the door. It was used in conjunction with a padlock to keep the door secure.
I believe that is Exhibit 74. And Detective, is this a close-up of the interior side of the rear door?
Yes, sir.
And what am I pointing to here?
That's the other part of the latch.
I believe that is Exhibit 75. Detective, can you identify what we see in this part of the photograph?
That is going to be a sticky fly trap and the latch for the door.
And that latch is on the interior side of the door?
Yes, sir.
With that is Exhibit 76. All right, Detective, what do we see in this photograph?
That is from the inside of the door, and the door is now closed. The latch that was used with the padlock.
I believe that is Exhibit 77. And Detective, can you identify this photograph?
This is the key that went to the padlock that was located on the mantle of the fireplace.
I'll move that as the next exhibit.
78.
Detective, please identify this photograph.
You're looking at that same back door from the inside. That's the entryway, the fireplace to the left, and toys in the floor.
Move is Exhibit 79. All right, Detective, describe this photograph.
This is in the living room. We're just to the left side of that door, and there's again toys in the floor.
Move this is Exhibit 80. And Detective, please describe this.
This is the padlock that would have been used on that back door. Detective Troy Martin, he's holding it as he photographs it.
Move that as Exhibit 81. Can you identify this, please?
That is the key to the padlock.
Move is Exhibit 82. Okay, Detective, start with the left side of this photograph and tell me what you see.
That is the TV that's in the living room. In the reflection, you can see myself and Detective Troy Martin. You can also see the reflection of Alex and Noah.
And what is Alex wearing?
Looks like he's wearing a white AC/DC t-shirt.
And from this photograph, can you see what Noah is wearing? Just a second.
Looks like he's wearing a blue shirt from this picture.
And what is this item on the floor?
It's an Easter basket.
And do you remember when Easter was in 2018?
I think it was just a Sunday prior to this happening.
So roughly 3 or 4 days prior to this?
Yes, sir.
And what do we see here?
That's a China hutch, and it's placed in front of the front door of the trailer to prevent that door from opening.
Move that as the next exhibit.
The 83.
Okay, Detective, which room of the house are we looking into in this photo?
This is considered the master bedroom, and it was the bedroom of Belle and Big Joe.
And what's hanging on this door?
Another Easter basket.
And can you identify what this is on part of this door?
It's another type of latch to keep doors closed.
Now, is this a single door, or are we looking at two doors?
It's 2 doors.
And can you describe some of the items or what this is on the floor in the bedroom?
There's a step stool, some toys, and maybe a small lockbox.
And these little white dots, do you know what those are?
To my knowledge, that was just trash.
What exhibit are we on?
On 84.
I'll move this as exhibit 84. Okay, Detective, what do we see here?
That's that same set of double doors leading to the master bedroom, just closer up.
And on the left of the 2 double doors, can you identify what this is?
It's half of the latch that would keep those 2 doors locked.
If you close those 2 doors, would this latch and lock be on the inside of the bedroom or the outside?
The outside of the bedroom.
So if you locked it, it would be locking something in the bedroom.
Yes, sir.
Next photograph, I'll move that as exhibit 87.
85.
And way off. All right, Detective, what do we see in this photograph?
We are inside the master bedroom, looking towards the back of the house.
And again, these photos are being taken on April the 4th, 2018.
Yes, sir.
What am I pointing to?
That is a bar stool with a shirt hanging over the back of it.
Is it a stool or a chair?
A bar chair. It looks like a bar height chair.
And here,
Same type of chair.
do you see a laundry basket anywhere in this grouping of furniture and other items?
I do not.
All right. Move that as the next exhibit.
86.
And what do you see in this photograph?
That's right beside the bed again with the step stool, the lockbox, and the trash in the floor.
Move that as exhibit 87. All right, what do we see?
That's the other side of the same bed. And it looks like there's some more trash in the floor and a toy.
Move as exhibit 88. Are we still in the master bedroom of Miss Bell and Big Joe?
Yes, sir.
And what is this photograph?
That's going to be of one of their bathrooms. There's actually 2 bathrooms in that bedroom.
Move this as the next exhibit.
89.
This photograph.
It's still in the master bedroom.
Move it as exhibit 90. This photograph.
The master bedroom again.
Move that as the next exhibit.
91.
And this photograph is taken.
I believe that's the other bathroom inside the master bedroom.
So there are 2 bathrooms in the master bedroom.
Yes. And I believe they're connected with a closet.
A closet goes in between the 2 bathrooms.
Yes, sir.
Move that as exhibit 92. We're still in the master bedroom.
Yes, and I think that's kind of the closet area in between the bathrooms.
Move that as exhibit 93. Detective, does it appear that the photograph is being taken from one bathroom through the hallway into the other?
Yes.
Move that as exhibit 94. And this photograph,
That's going to be the other bathroom.
move as exhibit 95. I'm not sure we're going to skip ahead. Detective, is the photograph you're holding the same photograph that we see on the screen?
It is.
And what is this?
It's just another picture of that bathroom.
Move that as the next exhibit.
96.
All right, let me stop right there. Detective, just why, what's the purpose of taking so many photographs?
We try to take pictures, as many pictures as we can of everything, so that if we need to refer back to them later, everything was documented. So we try to take pictures of everything.
So at this point, Tom, I mean, it appears that we're looking at a photograph of some Christmas wrapping paper and a green ball and a red ball and an Amazon box.
Yes.
I mean, at this point, Tom, is there something significant about those items?
No, sir.
And is there ever anything significant about these items?
No.
But you're just trying to document the scene?
Yes.
Move that as the next exhibit.
97.
What is this?
That is going to be in a closet, but I am not sure which one.
Move that as exhibit 98.
That's in that same closet.
Still in the master bedroom.
I believe it is.
Move that as exhibit 99.
And that's the closet again.
And I'll move that as exhibit 100. All right, detective, are we out of the master bedroom?
Yes, sir.
Where are we now?
This is going to be the living room.
And what do you see in this photograph?
That is a coffee table. There's a bottle on it and some clothing.
Do you know who the bottle belongs to?
I do not.
And what is this?
A toy truck.
What's this?
It looks like either a toy or a piece of trash.
And what are these items?
Clothing.
What's this? The white
It's a pair of socks,
and this
a pair of blue jeans,
and this.
a plaid shirt.
Okay. So, see any other clothing items on this table at this point?
I do not.
Move that as the next exhibit.
101.
All right, what do we see here?
It's the same coffee table from a different angle.
Okay. And you see a plastic hammer
Yes, sir.
on the floor next to the table?
Yes.
And what do you see on the couch?
Another toy truck.
Move that as the next exhibit.
102.
And what is this?
This is a crop from a picture that you saw earlier, but it's a picture of the side of their house, and out on Garners Creek Road you can see the maroon Impala parked on the road.
Move that as the next exhibit. And detective, you've shown two pictures of the maroon Impala parked on the road.
Yes.
And you justified that was the defendant's vehicle.
Yes.
But the defendant wasn't home when you got there.
He wasn't home when I got there. He got back to the house probably within 10 minutes of me getting there, because Sergeant Trevor Daniel asked Crystal if she would call him and ask for him to return home so he could talk to him. And so within 10 minutes, he returned to the house.
After you finished taking the documentation photos, what did you do next?
At that point, we had received some information that dogs had tracked to a pond behind the house, and that the pond was going to be pumped and searched. So I went back to that pond and observed.
You observed the pond being drained?
Yes, sir.
All right. And what did you do after that?
After that, South 3rd Street is right behind that pond. It's very close. And several of us had congregated in that area to just talk about what our plan was to do next. And Detective Jeff Lovell, who is one of my coworkers, received a phone call at that time from the defendant, Joseph. And Joseph asked,
The defendant gets back home,
yes, sir.
and you have just gone down the street to 3rd Street.
Yes,
The defendant calls and asks for someone to check his trunk
that's right.
after he returns home.
Yes.
All right. What did you do next?
After that, I didn't go check the trunk. My supervisor, Sergeant Daniel, he did that. After he checked the trunk, Sergeant Daniel asked me and Detective Lovell, would you guys ask Joseph if he minds riding with you guys and showing you where all he looked for Joe Clyde? So we asked him, and he agreed to ride with us and show us where he looked.
And I want to be super clear on this. When you say you asked the defendant to ride with you, Was he under arrest?
He was not.
Had he been approached or confronted about any type of criminal activity?
No, sir.
Had he been free to come and go all morning long?
Yes.
Was he free to say, I'm not riding with you?
Yes.
Was there any pressure of any nature used to get him to ride with you?
No, sir.
All right. And did you record this ride as you drove the defendant around?
Yes.
And we have a recording of that today, is that correct?
Yes.
And at this point, I'm going to move a copy of the interview or of the recording of yourself and the defendant and Detective Lovell as you are driving around Garner's Creek.
That will be Exhibit 104.
Thank you. And before we start, we have transcripts for the jury to follow along with. We could distribute those. Judge, we'll need a couple of minutes for the defense to look at our transcript.
Well, let's go ahead and just take a recess and stretch our leg before we start into this video. How long is this video?
It's over an hour.
Over an hour, so we'll need to go ahead and take our afternoon recess right now. Thank you. We'll be in recess 15 minutes.
All rise.
Recording
This court is in
stopped.
recess.